must be the proudest mother in the world. My son, Jesus, has done so many magnificent things. But I must be the saddest mother in the world. Well, when a loved one leaves us, I remember using this for Joseph. My husband was older than me, and I was young when we got married, but he was the most amazing man. I never thought I would need to use this for my son, the Son of God. And Joseph still married me. What a privilege to be visited by the angel on that night, and to learn that I was going to give birth to Emmanuel, God with us. Oh, my Jesus did so many, many things. He taught many people. He preached about love, forgiveness. He taught us about God's love. He performed miracles because the power of the Lord was with him, the Spirit of God. He turned water into wine. He walked on water. He calmed a storm. He had power over all the forces of nature. He healed the sick. He even raised Lazarus from the dead. And yet, he was betrayed by his own people. Even his friends. Oh, Judas. Judas gave up his relationship with Jesus and betrayed him with a kiss, all for 30 pieces of silver. And so my son was led away. He was brought before Pilate. Surely Pilate would see that Jesus was our salvation. But no, the people spoke, and Pilate washed his hands. Given the choice between Jesus and Barabbas, the robber, the people cried out for Barabbas, Barabbas, Barabbas. And my heart shattered as my son was led away. He was tortured, cruelly tortured. They whipped him. Do you know how they prepare the whips? They roll them in clay, and then pieces of broken pottery, stones, and then they scourge the victim, my son, to be sure that those little pieces of sharp objects would rip the flesh as the tail came out. And so my son was brought before Pilate, a quivering mess of gelatinous flesh, and yet he stood strong. At any time he could have stopped it, but this is something he had to do. He had tried to explain this to me and his followers over the years, that one day the temple would be torn down and yet brought to life, raised up again. How could that be? And so, my son, the Son of God, and so the Son of God was led away to be crucified. It sounds so clean and simple. Crucified. But if you see it, his body already covered in stripes from the scourging, laying down on a piece of wood. Nails. And I saw him in pain. A mother's heart broken. There were others who loved him there too. Our voices cried out, but we weren't heard amongst the crowd. I knew from things he had told me that it was something he had to do. He spoke about the sin of mankind, and I have to admit we all fall short. He said there needed to be a way to come back to God, to have that relationship with God that Adam and Eve once shared in the Garden of Eden. I am in a very unique situation with Jesus, the King of the Jews. I was there when he drew his first breath on this earth, and I was there as he breathed his last. And yet the love that poured out as his blood flowed, as he was nailed to the cross. Many cry out with expletives in their agony, but not him. He raised his eyes to heaven as he spoke to God, his Father, and he said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." These people didn't understand. The soldiers were doing their job. They didn't know. They didn't understand who he really, really was. And as he hung there, and I stood at his feet, tears flowing, mixing with the blood that fell from the cross. And John, he loved John. He was one of his disciples, and he loved John. John came and he put his hand on my shoulder as we both stood there, our hearts aching. And my son, my Jesus, looked upon us, and he said, "Woman," it's me, he spoke to me, "behold thy son." I looked at John, and Jesus looked at him and said, "John, behold thy mother." An adoption. So thoughtful that Jesus wanted to ensure that we would both be cared for during our lifetime when he had to leave. So it gets very interesting. Followers of Jesus with means took Jesus to a tomb, the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. He gave up his own resting place for the Son of God. Nicodemus was there, and they took him there. But those people, they did not want anything to go wrong. They told the Roman soldiers to put this heavy stone. It had been a time of earthquakes, strangely enough. As my son breathed his last, the earth shook. And the curtain in the temple was torn asunder. But not as if any man could have done it, because it was torn from the top to the bottom, and a way came through. There was no division between the Holy of Holies. Just anyone could walk through, not just the priests, but anyone. I think they were mindful of this when they suggested the heaviest stone be rolled in front of the tomb. It took a lot of strength to place it there, and nothing was going to move that stone. But like any mother, I wanted to go to his resting place and grieve. And so did the others. Mary, my friend Mary Magdalene, and Joanna. We went down. When we got there, what we saw horrified us. It was impossible. The soldiers that were guarding the tomb, because there was a fear that the disciples were going to steal Jesus' body. Ridiculous. The soldiers that had been put there to guard the tomb were lying there unconscious. At first we thought they were dead. stone, that big heavy stone that was covering the entrance, had been moved aside. And straight away we felt that someone had taken him. Who would do that? The disciples would not have done that. Who would take the body of my Jesus, God's Son? Who would do that? Cautiously, we looked inside, and we saw two men, not like any men we had seen locally. They were shining. They smiled at us and said, "Why are you here? Why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? Go. He's not here. He's risen." This perplexed us. They told us to go and tell the disciples. So we left, confused. My heart. A mother's heart. This is something no mother should ever have to go through. We went and told the disciples what we had seen and heard. And so Peter and John, they went right away. Mary followed. And they too found that the tomb was empty. They went in, they investigated. They were very brave. John went in first, and they found everything neatly arranged, neatly folded up, and the cloth that was covering my son's face was rolled up separately. Everything was so tidy. Mary stayed on, and she spoke to somebody. And she thought it was the gardener. We like to keep our tombs neat and tidy. For those of us who return to grieve for the loss of our loved ones. And so she begged the gardener to tell her where our Lord lay, who had taken him. And he said her name, Mary, same as mine. She looked up, and do you know who she saw? She recognized him. When she told me of this, she recognized Jesus alive. She tried to touch him and hold on to him. He said, "Not yet. I need to return to my Father. Not yet." So she came back and she told us. We were all, Mary, that's grief. I wanted to believe it. I did. I truly wanted to believe it. And then we looked. And there he was. All the doors were closed. No one had opened that door. And yet there he was, standing in the midst of us, my son, alive. Oh, what a reunion, I can tell you. My boy, my grown man, the Son of God, the Son of God who conquered death. Some went there after his visit. Thomas came. He said, no, we told him, we were all so excited. No, he said, if I can't see for myself, if I can't touch his wounds, put my hand in his side where he was speared as he was dead before they could break his legs. No, Thomas said, I won't believe. And do you know what? He came again. My Jesus was standing there. He had appeared to others. He had made food for them. He was alive and real. He had conquered death. And Thomas believed, but Jesus said, no, feel, I am real. I am real. He told Thomas, you doubted. And I had to prove that I am real. But there are others who will not see with their eyes, but they will believe. They will believe. And they are blessed. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. That's faith. All those future generations who hear the story, who read the story in the word that God gives us. Those who believe. How blessed they are. And so now Jesus, who rose from the dead, who gave us great joy, who healed the sick, who turned water to wine, who fed 5,000 and more. Jesus is alive. He rose from the dead, and he lives forevermore. And he has made a way for each one of us to approach the throne of God himself. Before, it was like the temple. We couldn't get into that holy of holy places. But it took Jesus to tear that curtain from top to bottom. It took Jesus to step up to the gates of Hades and fight the devil himself and defeat him. Oh, how the devil must have thought that he had won on that day of darkness. And then Jesus burst through those gates and defeated him. He defeated death. There is no sting in death. Because of the Son of God coming to earth in flesh, being born of just me, an ordinary woman. We have a way to approach the throne of God. We have a way to salvation through him. And I am so thankful, as we all are. Blessed are those who believe without seeing. I am the proudest mother in the world. I am the happiest mother in the world. the most blessed mother in the world. And blessed are those who believe without seeing.